Maria Santos wiped down the executive conference table for the third time that morning. The mahogany surface gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the 42nd floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown Chicago stretched endlessly, but Maria barely noticed the view anymore. She had been cleaning these same offices for 15 years, invisible to the suits who rushed past her cart in the hallways. At 28, Maria moved with quiet efficiency through the corporate headquarters of Meridian International, one of the city's largest consulting firms. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform was always spotless. She took pride in her work, even if others didn't notice her efforts. What they definitely didn't know was that Maria spoke 7 languages fluently. Growing up as the daughter of Carlos Santos, the building's head janitor, Maria had learned early that education was her ticket to something better. While her father worked double shifts to keep the lights on in their small apartment, Maria buried herself in books. She discovered she had a gift for languages that seemed almost supernatural. Spanish came naturally from home. English she mastered in school with determination that impressed her teachers. French she picked up from library books and online videos. German followed when she found old textbooks in a dumpster behind the university. Italian came from befriending Mrs. Rossi, the elderly woman who lived next door. Mandarin she taught herself using smartphone apps during her breaks. Portuguese she learned from Brazilian co-workers at her weekend job. But none of the executives at Meridian knew any of this. To them, she was just the cleaning lady's daughter who emptied their trash cans and vacuumed their carpets. On this particular Tuesday morning, the executive floor buzzed with unusual energy. Maria had overheard fragments of conversations about a massive deal that could make or break the company's future. Something about a $30 million contract with international partners. The way the executives whispered in corners and held emergency meetings told her this was bigger than their usual business. Robert Harrison, the CEO, looked particularly stressed. Maria had watched him for years, noting how his shoulders tensed when deals went badly, and how he paced the halls when pressure mounted. Today, his salt and pepper hair was disheveled, and his usually perfect tie hung slightly crooked. As Maria emptied the wastebasket in Harrison's outer office, his assistant Jennifer rushed past, clutching a stack of papers and looking panicked. The translator called in sick. Jennifer was saying into her headset, "No, we can't postpone. The delegation arrives in 3 hours. This contract has been months in the making." Maria's ears perked up, but she continued her work silently. In her world, invisible people heard everything. Harrison's voice carried from his office, sharp with frustration. "What do you mean we can't find another translator? This is Chicago, not some remote village. There have to be professionals available." "Sir, it's not just any translator we need," Jennifer replied, following him into his office. "The delegation includes representatives from Brazil, Germany, and China. We need someone who can handle Portuguese, German, and Mandarin, plus English obviously. Most translators specialize in 1 or 2 languages, not 4. Maria paused in her cleaning. Portuguese, German, Mandarin, and English. She spoke all 4 fluently. "The Peterson Group is already skeptical about working with us," Harrison continued, his voice rising. "If we can't even communicate properly with their international partners, they'll walk. $30 million down the drain, and half our staff will be looking for new jobs by Christmas." Through the glass wall of Harrison's office, Maria could see him running his hands through his hair. Jennifer stood beside his desk, frantically making phone calls to translator services around the city. Maria had never spoken directly to Harrison beyond polite greetings when he occasionally acknowledged her presence. In his world, she simply didn't exist as anything more than part of the building's furniture. But she knew more about his business than he might expect. Cleaning offices meant seeing documents left on desks, overhearing phone calls, and witnessing the human drama that played out in corporate America every day. She knew Harrison was a good man who treated his employees fairly. Unlike some executives she'd encountered in other buildings, he never spoke rudely to the cleaning staff or demanded they work around important meetings. He paid overtime when projects ran late and had instituted a college scholarship program for employees' children, though Maria had been too proud to apply. The phone calls continued for another hour. Every translator service in the city was either booked unavailable, or couldn't handle all three languages. Maria watched Jennifer's growing desperation and Harrison's increasing panic as the clock ticked toward the delegation's arrival. At 11:30, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She knocked gently on Harrison's open office door. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison," she said softly. Both Harrison and Jennifer looked up, surprised. They were so deep in crisis mode that they'd forgotten anyone else was in the area. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Maria continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I couldn't help overhearing about your translator situation." Harrison looked confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you with one of the services Jennifer's been calling?" "No, sir. I'm Maria Santos. I work in building maintenance." She gestured to her cleaning cart in the hallway. "I believe I can help with your translation needs." Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. Harrison stared at Maria as if seeing her for the first time, though she'd been cleaning his office for years. "I'm not sure I follow," Harrison said carefully. Maria took a deep breath. "I speak Portuguese, German, Mandarin, and English fluently. If you need someone to translate for your meeting, I can do it." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Jennifer and Harrison exchanged glances, clearly trying to process what they'd just heard. "You speak all four languages?" Jennifer asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yes, ma'am. I've been studying languages since I was young. It's always been my passion." Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying Maria with new interest. "This is quite unexpected. May I ask about your experience with business translation? These are complex financial negotiations." Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "I understand you don't know me in that capacity, Mr. Harrison, but I've been cleaning these offices for years. I've overheard countless business meetings and read documents while emptying trash cans. I understand corporate terminology in all four languages." The admission hung in the air. Maria had essentially confessed to learning their business secrets through her cleaning duties, though nothing she'd done was illegal or unethical. Harrison stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the city while he considered this unprecedented situation. His company's future hung in the balance, and his only solution might be the woman who'd been invisible to him for years. "Maria," he said finally, turning back to face her, "I have to ask, why didn't you ever mention your language skills before? With abilities like that, you could be working as a translator or in international business." The question Maria had hoped to avoid. She looked down at her hands, then met his eyes directly. "Opportunities don't always present themselves equally, Mr. Harrison. I needed work immediately when I started here, and this job was available. I've been supporting my family while continuing my education online. I never imagined a situation like this would arise." Harrison nodded slowly, understanding more than he said aloud. He'd spent enough time in corporate America to recognize the barriers that existed for people like Maria, regardless of their talents. Jennifer interrupted the moment. "Sir, it's almost noon. The delegation will be here in an hour and a half." Harrison made his decision. "Maria, I'm going to take what might be the biggest gamble of my career. Are you absolutely certain you can handle this translation work? We're talking about a $30 million deal that affects hundreds of jobs. I understand the gravity of the situation, Mr. Harrison. I won't let you down. Jennifer, take Maria to get appropriate attire for the meeting. Use the emergency fund if necessary. We need her looking professional in an hour." As Jennifer led Maria toward the elevator, Harrison called after them. "Maria, one more thing. After this meeting, regardless of how it goes, we need to have a serious conversation about your career here. It's clear I've been overlooking significant talent." The next hour passed in a blur. Jennifer took Maria to an upscale department store in the building's ground level, where they quickly selected a professional black suit, white blouse, and conservative shoes. In the store's dressing room, Maria transformed from cleaning lady to corporate professional. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The suit fit perfectly, and, for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged in the executive world she'd been cleaning around for so long. Back in the building, Jennifer gave Maria a crash course in the meeting's objectives and the key players involved. The delegation represented 3 major international companies looking to partner with Meridian on a massive infrastructure project. The Brazilian representative handled South American operations, the German managed European logistics, and the Chinese executive oversaw Asian markets. The Peterson Group will be leading the American side, Jennifer explained as they reviewed documents. They're already nervous about Meridian's ability to handle international partnerships. One translation error could doom the entire deal. Maria absorbed every detail, her mind already switching between languages as she prepared for what lay ahead. She thought about her father, currently cleaning bathrooms 3 floors below, who had no idea his daughter was about to attempt something that could change both their lives. At 1:45, the delegates began arriving. Maria watched from Harrison's office as an elegant Brazilian woman in her 50s stepped off the elevator, followed by a stern-looking German man in an expensive suit, and, finally, a young Chinese businessman who carried himself with quiet confidence. The Peterson Group representatives arrived simultaneously, led by Margaret Peterson herself, a legendary figure in Chicago business circles. Harrison straightened his tie and turned to Maria. "Are you ready for this?" Maria nodded, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "I'm ready, Mr. Harrison." As they walked toward the conference room, Maria's mind raced through vocabulary in all 4 languages, preparing for the challenge of her life. She thought about the years of studying in her small apartment, the languages learned in secret, the dreams she'd kept hidden while pushing a cleaning cart through these same halls. Today, everything would change. The conference room was packed when they entered. The massive table was surrounded by some of the most powerful business people in 3 continents, all waiting for negotiations that could reshape international partnerships worth tens of millions of dollars. Margaret Peterson looked up as Harrison and Maria entered. "Robert, I trust you've resolved your translator situation? We can't afford any communication breakdowns today." Harrison gestured toward Maria. "May I introduce Maria Santos, our translator for today's negotiations?" The room fell silent. Several delegates exchanged glances, clearly surprised by Maria's youth and appearance. She could sense their skepticism, the questions they were too polite to ask aloud. The Brazilian delegate, Dr. Carmen Oliveira, spoke first in heavily accented English. "Perhaps we should test the translation capabilities before we begin." Harrison nodded. "Of course. Maria, would you be comfortable with that?" "Certainly," Maria replied, her voice clear and confident. Dr. Oliveira switched to rapid Portuguese, speaking about complex financial structures and international banking regulations. Without hesitation, Maria translated her words into perfect English, maintaining both the technical accuracy and the speaker's intended tone. The German delegate, Klaus Weber, followed with a detailed question in German about environmental compliance standards. Maria's translation was flawless, capturing even the subtle legal implications of his phrasing. Finally, the Chinese executive, David Liu, spoke in Mandarin about market penetration strategies and cultural considerations. Maria's English translation preserved not only the meaning but the diplomatic nuances that could make or break international relationships. The room remained quiet for a moment after the impromptu test concluded. Then, Margaret Peterson smiled for the first time since arriving. "Impressive," she said simply. "Shall we begin?" As the formal negotiations started, Maria found herself in her element. Years of invisible observation had taught her to read people's intentions beyond their words. She translated not just language, but cultural context, helping all parties understand not only what was being said, but what was meant. When Dr. Oliveira expressed concerns about timeline flexibility using Brazilian business idioms, Maria explained the cultural context to help the Americans understand that this was negotiating strategy, not genuine inflexibility. When Klaus Weber used German directness that could have seemed rude to American sensibilities, Maria softened the translation while maintaining the essential meaning, preventing potential offense. When David Liu employed Chinese diplomatic indirectness to suggest modifications to the contract, Maria helped the other parties understand the real requests hidden within the polite phrasing. For 3 hours, Maria facilitated conversations that would have been impossible without her skills. She watched $30 million in business negotiations unfold, knowing that every word she translated correctly brought Harrison's company closer to success. As the meeting progressed, she noticed something remarkable happening. The delegates began addressing her directly, recognizing her not just as a translator, but as a vital facilitator of their communication. They asked her opinion on phrasing, requested clarification on cultural nuances, and treated her as an essential part of the business process. Harrison watched it all with growing amazement. The woman he'd never really noticed was commanding respect from some of the most powerful business leaders in the world. When the meeting concluded with preliminary agreements and plans for final contracts, the delegates approached Maria individually to thank her for her exceptional work. "Your skills saved us hours of miscommunication," Dr. Oliveira told her in Portuguese, which Maria accepted with gracious humility. "Professional excellence," Klaus Weber stated in his characteristic German brevity. "You have brought honor to this negotiation," David Liu said in Mandarin, using a phrase that carried deep respect in Chinese business culture. Margaret Peterson was the last to speak to Maria as the room cleared. "Young lady, I don't know where Robert found you, but you've just facilitated one of the smoothest international negotiations I've ever witnessed. That's no small accomplishment." After the delegates left, Harrison asked Maria to remain in the conference room. They sat alone at the massive table where millions of dollars in agreements had just been discussed. "Maria," Harrison began, "I owe you an apology. For years, I've walked past you in these hallways without really seeing you. Today, you saved my company." Maria felt tears threatening, but maintained her composure. "Thank you for giving me the chance, Mr. Harrison. The question now is what happens next. It's clear you belong in international business, not pushing a cleaning cart. I'd like to offer you a position in our International Relations Department, starting immediately." The offer hung in the air between them. Maria thought about her father, still working floors below. She thought about the years of hidden studying, the languages learned in secret, the dreams she'd almost given up on. "There's something I need to tell you first," she said quietly. Harrison waited. "I'll need time to give proper notice in my current position, and I'd like to recommend someone to replace me in the maintenance department." "Of course. May I ask who?" 3 weeks after the historic negotiation, Maria Santos sat in her new office on the 38th floor of Meridian International. The space wasn't huge, but it had a window that looked out over Lake Michigan. After years of working in windowless utility closets and storage areas, natural light felt like a luxury. Her new title was International Relations Specialist, and her salary had increased by 300% overnight. But the transition hadn't been as smooth as she'd hoped. The corporate world had its own language beyond the 7 she already spoke fluently. There were unwritten rules about office politics, networking events, and social hierarchies that no textbook could teach. Maria found herself navigating not just language barriers, but cultural divides within her own company. Some colleagues welcomed her with genuine enthusiasm. They were impressed by her language skills and grateful for her expertise on international projects. But others viewed her promotion with skepticism and barely concealed resentment. "I heard she was just a janitor last month," Maria overheard Sandra Walsh whisper to another colleague near the coffee machine. Suddenly, "She's translating million-dollar deals? Something doesn't add up." "Probably some diversity hire situation," replied James Chun, Jennifer's cousin who worked in marketing. "Companies do that now to look good." Maria pretended not to hear, but the words stung. She'd earned her position through years of self-education and proven herself under the most pressure imaginable. Yet some people seemed determined to reduce her success to politics rather than merit. The real challenge came during her first major project assignment. Harrison had asked her to lead communication efforts for the next phase of the Peterson Group partnership, which involved expanding into Southeast Asian markets. The project required coordinating with teams in Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. "I should probably mention," Maria told Harrison during their weekly check-in, "I don't speak Thai, Vietnamese, or Indonesian." Harrison looked surprised. "I thought you spoke 7 languages." "I do. Spanish, English, French, German, Italian, Mandarin, and Portuguese. But there are thousands of languages in the world, Mr. Harrison. I can't possibly know them all." It was a humbling moment for both of them. Harrison realized he'd fallen into the trap of assuming Maria's abilities were unlimited, while Maria confronted the reality that her expertise, impressive as it was, still had boundaries. "How quickly can you learn new languages?" Harrison asked. Maria considered the question carefully. "With immersive study and practice partners, I could probably achieve conversational fluency in 3 to 6 months." Business fluency would take longer, maybe a year for each language. We need to present to the Southeast Asian partners in 8 weeks. The impossible timeline hung between them. Maria felt the familiar pressure that had driven her to succeed, but this time the stakes felt even higher. She wasn't just proving herself anymore. She was representing all the people who looked like her, who'd been overlooked, who were watching to see if someone from their background could really make it in this world. That evening, Maria called her father to discuss the situation. Carlos Santos was proud of his daughter's success, but worried about the pressure she was putting on herself. "Mija, you don't have to be perfect at everything," he said in Spanish as they shared dinner in his small apartment. "You proved yourself already. Nobody can take that away." "But what if I fail this time, Papa? What if people say I only succeeded because of luck?" Carlos set down his fork and looked at his daughter seriously. "Listen to me. I've cleaned offices for 30 years. I've watched hundreds of executives come and go. Most of them fail at something eventually. The difference is when they fail, people say it's just business. When people like us fail, they say it proves we never belonged there in the first place." His words were harsh, but true. Maria understood the double standard she faced. "So what do I do?" "You do what you've always done. You work harder than everyone else, and you find a way to succeed." The next morning, Maria developed a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Instead of trying to learn 3 new languages in 8 weeks, she would build a network of local interpreters and cultural consultants in each target country. Her role would shift from direct translation to coordination and cultural bridge building. She spent the next week researching universities, language schools, and professional associations in Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City, and Jakarta. Using her existing language skills, she reached out to contacts in the international business community who could connect her with qualified local professionals. The strategy required Maria to become more than a translator. She had to become a cultural consultant and project manager. She studied the business customs, negotiation styles, and social hierarchies of each target market. Meanwhile, resistance within Meridian continued to grow. A group of senior employees, led by Sandra Walsh and James Chun, began questioning Maria's qualifications more openly. They requested her educational credentials, complained about her special treatment, and suggested that someone with more traditional business experience should lead the Southeast Asian expansion. The criticism came to a head during a department meeting where Sandra directly challenged Maria's approach. "I'm concerned about relying on local interpreters instead of having in-house language capabilities," Sandra said, her voice carrying across the conference room. "How can we ensure quality control? How do we know these local contacts are reliable?" The question was valid on its surface, but delivered with an undertone that questioned Maria's competence. Every eye in the room turned to Maria, waiting for her response. "That's an excellent question, Sandra," Maria replied calmly. "Quality control is exactly why I'm building relationships with multiple interpreters in each market rather than relying on a single contact. I'm also requiring references from international businesses that have used their services." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing detailed profiles of her potential partners. Each interpreter has been vetted through university connections, professional associations, and previous client testimonials. In addition, I'll be conducting video interviews with final candidates to assess their business communication skills personally. Sandra wasn't satisfied. "But you can't personally verify their language accuracy if you don't speak the languages yourself." "Actually, I can," Maria responded. "While I don't speak Thai, Vietnamese, or Indonesian fluently yet, I do speak Mandarin. Many business professionals in Southeast Asia also speak Mandarin as a regional lingua franca. I can use that as a verification method for complex business terminology." The room was silent. Maria had not only answered Sandra's challenge, but demonstrated a deeper understanding of regional linguistics than her critic possessed. Harrison spoke up from the back of the room. "Maria, this sounds like a comprehensive approach. What's your timeline for implementation?" "I'll have initial interpreter partnerships established within 2 weeks. Cultural consultation materials will be ready for review in 3 weeks. Full preparation for the Southeast Asian presentations will be complete in 6 weeks, giving us 2 weeks for rehearsal and refinement." After the meeting, several colleagues approached Maria privately to express support. Tom Rodriguez from the legal department had been watching the office dynamics with concern. "You handled that well," he told her quietly. "But you should know Sandra's been building a coalition against you. She's convinced some people that your promotion sets a dangerous precedent." "What kind of precedent?" "That qualified people can come from anywhere, not just traditional backgrounds. Some folks find that threatening to their own positions." Maria appreciated Tom's honesty, but it also reinforced the pressure she felt. She wasn't just succeeding or failing as an individual. She was representing the possibility that talent could emerge from unexpected places. Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into preparation for the Southeast Asian expansion with an intensity that worried even her father. She worked 16-hour days, studying market conditions, building interpreter networks, and developing cultural competency materials. Her efforts began paying off when her first interpreter partner, Dr. Siraporn Thanakit from Bangkok, proved to be exceptionally qualified. Dr. Thanakit held a doctorate in international business and had interpreted for Fortune 500 companies throughout Southeast Asia. "Your approach is very professional," Dr. Thanakit told Maria during their video call. "Most American companies simply assume English will be sufficient or bring interpreters who don't understand local business culture. You're taking time to understand our perspective." Similar partnerships developed in Vietnam and Indonesia. Maria's network included not just interpreters, but cultural consultants who could help Meridian avoid the social mistakes that had derailed other international expansions. The real test came when Margaret Peterson requested a preliminary presentation about the Southeast Asian strategy. She wanted to evaluate Meridian's approach before committing Peterson Group resources to the expansion. Maria had never presented directly to Margaret Peterson, one of the most intimidating figures in Chicago business. The woman who had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing was known for her direct questions and low tolerance for incompetence. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday morning in Meridian's largest conference room. Harrison would introduce the project, but Maria would handle the detailed strategy discussion. The night before the presentation, Maria's nerves finally got the better of her. She called her father, fighting back tears. "Papa, what if I'm not ready for this? What if I mess up in front of Margaret Peterson?" "Maria, listen to me. You saved a $30 million deal when nobody thought you could. You've built business relationships across 3 countries in 3 weeks. You're ready. But what if? No what ifs. You know what you're doing. Trust yourself." The morning of the presentation arrived gray and rainy, matching Maria's mood. She dressed in her most professional suit and arrived at the office an hour early to review her materials one final time. Margaret Peterson arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 3 executives from Peterson Group. She nodded acknowledgement to Harrison and took her seat at the head of the conference table. "Robert, I understand you have a new approach for our Southeast Asian expansion," Peterson said without preamble. "Given the importance of these markets to our partnership, I want to understand your strategy completely." Harrison introduced Maria and the project background, then turned the presentation over to her. Maria had prepared for this moment extensively, but standing before Margaret Peterson still felt surreal. 3 months ago, she'd been invisible in these same halls. Now she was presenting international business strategy to one of the most powerful women in corporate America. "Mrs. Peterson, our approach to Southeast Asian expansion recognizes that success in these markets requires more than translation. It requires cultural fluency," Maria began, her voice steady despite her nerves. She outlined her interpreter network, cultural consultation strategy, and market-specific preparation plans. Peterson listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that tested Maria's understanding of regional business practices. "You mentioned that gift-giving customs vary significantly between Thailand and Indonesia," Peterson noted. "Can you give me specific examples of how this might affect our negotiations?" Maria was ready. "Certainly. In Thailand, gifts should be wrapped in bright colors, but never blue or black, which are associated with mourning. The gift should be presented with both hands and received graciously, but not opened immediately. In Indonesia, particularly in Muslim business contexts, gifts should avoid leather products unless you're certain they're from halal sources. The timing of gift presentation is also different. Thais typically exchange gifts at the beginning of meetings, while Indonesians often prefer the conclusion. Peterson nodded approvingly. And how do these customs translate into practical business applications? We've prepared culture-specific protocols for each market. Our Jakarta interpreter will brief our team on appropriate gift selection before meetings, while our Bangkok partner will arrange for proper gift wrapping and presentation timing. This level of detail shows respect for local customs and differentiates us from competitors who treat the region as a monolithic market. The presentation continued for an hour, with Peterson drilling down into logistics, costs, and risk management. Maria answered every question with specificity and confidence, drawing on weeks of intensive preparation. When the formal presentation concluded, Peterson sat quietly for a moment, reviewing her notes. "This is impressive work," she said finally. "You've developed a comprehensive approach that addresses both linguistic and cultural challenges. My only concern is timeline. 8 weeks seems ambitious for this level of preparation." "We're actually ahead of schedule," Maria replied. "Our interpreter partnerships are established, and initial cultural briefings are complete. I'm confident we'll be ready for the target presentation date." Peterson smiled, the first genuine smile Maria had seen from her. "Robert, you found yourself quite a resource. I'm impressed by both the strategy and the execution plan." As the Peterson Group executives filed out, Peterson approached Maria directly. "I understand you've had quite a journey to reach this position," she said quietly. "I respect people who earn their opportunities through merit and hard work. Keep up the excellent work." After Peterson left, Harrison found Maria in the hallway, leaning against the wall and taking deep breaths. "You were brilliant in there," he told her. "I think you just secured our Southeast Asian expansion." Maria felt a mix of relief and satisfaction, but also something else, a growing confidence that she truly belonged in this world. The imposter syndrome that had plagued her for weeks was finally beginning to fade. That afternoon, Sandra Walsh approached Maria's office. The tension between them had been palpable for weeks, and Maria braced herself for another confrontation. "I owe you an apology," Sandra said, standing in Maria's doorway. "I've been skeptical of your qualifications since your promotion. After watching that presentation today, I realize I was wrong." The apology was unexpected. Maria gestured for Sandra to take a seat. "I was threatened by your success," Sandra continued. "I've been working in international business for 8 years, and you accomplished in 3 weeks what I wasn't sure I could do in 3 months. Instead of learning from you, I tried to undermine you. That was unprofessional and unfair." Maria considered her response carefully. She could have been gracious and moved on, but she sensed an opportunity for something more important. "Sandra, can I ask you something? What specifically made you feel threatened?" Sandra looked uncomfortable, but answered honestly. "I guess I felt like if someone with your background could succeed so quickly, it meant my years of experience weren't as valuable as I thought." "But that's not how talent works," Maria replied gently. "Your experience is valuable. My language skills are valuable. The company is stronger when we combine our different strengths rather than compete against each other." The conversation continued for 30 minutes, evolving into a discussion about office dynamics, professional development, and the challenges of working in a competitive environment. By the end, both women had gained new respect for each other. As Sandra left, she turned back to Maria. "I'd like to help with the Southeast Asian project if you need support. I have experience with international contracts that might be useful." Maria smiled. "I'd welcome your help. We're stronger as a team." That evening, Maria called her father to share the day's success. Carlos listened proudly as his daughter described the presentation and the positive response from Margaret Peterson. "I'm proud of you, Mija," he said. "But I'm even more proud that you're handling success with dignity. It's easy to become good at your job. It's harder to become good at working with people." Maria understood what he meant. Her technical skills had opened doors, but her ability to navigate relationships and build bridges would determine her long-term success. As she prepared for sleep that night, Maria reflected on how the Bangkok hotel conference room was filled with tension despite the elegant surroundings and 5-star service. Maria Santos sat at a polished teak table surrounded by executives from 3 countries, watching 2 months of careful preparation threaten to collapse in a matter of minutes. The Southeast Asian expansion had started successfully, Maria's cultural preparation and interpreter partnerships had impressed the Thai and Indonesian business leaders during initial presentations. Contracts worth $45 million were within reach, exceeding even Margaret Peterson's ambitious projections. But now everything was falling apart because of one crucial detail Maria's team had missed. Dr. Wijaya, the Indonesian conglomerate leader, was clearly agitated as he spoke rapidly in Indonesian to his translator. The issue wasn't language. Maria's interpreter network was functioning perfectly. The problem was generational conflict that transcended any language barrier. The young woman is qualified technically, Dr. Wijaya was saying, his words translated into English by Maria's Indonesian partner. But in our culture, major business decisions are discussed between senior executives with many years of experience. This is too important for someone so young to lead. Maria felt her heart sink. Despite all her preparation for cultural nuances, she'd overlooked one of the most fundamental aspects of Southeast Asian business culture, the deep respect for age and seniority that governed professional relationships. At 28, Maria was the youngest person in the room by at least 15 years. Her counterparts were seasoned executives in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who had built their careers through decades of relationship building and proven experience. Mr. Tanaka from the Japanese consulting firm that was facilitating the meetings nodded in agreement with Dr. Wijaya's concerns. In our region, we believe wisdom comes with time. No matter how intelligent or capable, a young person cannot have the judgment that comes from experiencing many business cycles. Harrison looked stunned. This was the exact scenario they'd hoped to avoid, cultural miscommunication that could derail months of work. He glanced at Maria, clearly uncertain how to proceed. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Dr. Siraporn Thanakit, Maria's Bangkok interpreter, spoke quietly to the group in English. Perhaps there's something all parties should understand about Ms. Santos that provides important context. All eyes turned to Dr. Thanakit, who had been observing the dynamics carefully throughout the week-long negotiations. In my preliminary research about Meridian International's team, I learned Ms. Santos's background. She began working at age 13 to support her family while maintaining perfect academic performance. She taught herself 4 languages while working full-time jobs. She identified and solved a critical business problem that saved her company $30 million. Her promotion was based on extraordinary merit under pressure. Dr. Thanakit paused, allowing her words to be translated into Indonesian and Thai for those who preferred their native languages. In our cultures, we do respect age and experience. But we also have deep respect for individuals who demonstrate exceptional dedication to family, education, and professional excellence despite difficult circumstances. Ms. Santos represents qualities we value highly. Maria felt gratitude toward Dr. Thanakit, but also knew she needed to address the concerns herself. This was a moment that would define not just this deal, but potentially her entire career in international business. She stood up slowly, making eye contact with each executive around the table. Dr. Wijaya, Mr. Tanaka, distinguished colleagues. She began, speaking clearly so the translators could convey not just her words but her tone. I understand and respect your concerns about my age and experience. You're right that I haven't lived through as many business cycles as others in this room. She paused, organizing her thoughts carefully. But I'd like to share what I have learned in my 28 years, particularly about the value of different perspectives working together. Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. When I was cleaning offices for 7 years, I learned that successful businesses depend on people at every level contributing their unique strengths. The executives made strategic decisions, but the maintenance staff often noticed problems first, equipment failures, security issues, patterns that others missed. The room was completely silent now, with everyone listening intently. My youth means I don't have decades of traditional business experience. But it also means I approach problems differently. I see opportunities that others might miss because they don't fit conventional patterns. I'm willing to build new types of partnerships because I'm not constrained by how things have always been done. Dr. Wijaya leaned forward, clearly interested in her perspective. The Southeast Asian expansion we're discussing requires exactly that kind of fresh thinking, Maria continued. You're not just buying traditional consulting services. You're investing in innovation, in new approaches to cross-cultural business development, in partnerships that bridge generational and cultural gaps. She gestured around the table. Look at this room. We have executives from 5 countries, 3 generations, and different business philosophies. The magic isn't in any one person's experience. It's in how we combine all our different strengths. Mr. Tanaka spoke up. Miss Santos, your point about combining different perspectives is well taken. But major financial decisions require proven judgment. How do we evaluate your decision-making capabilities? Maria had anticipated this question and was prepared with specific examples. 6 weeks ago, when I was building our interpreter network, I had to choose between 2 highly qualified candidates in Vietnam. One had more traditional credentials and charged higher fees. The other was younger, but had innovative approaches to technical translation. I chose the younger interpreter because innovation was more important for our specific needs than conventional credentials. She clicked to a slide showing preliminary results from their Vietnamese market research. That decision led to insights about Vietnamese business culture that our competitors missed completely. We discovered that younger Vietnamese entrepreneurs are driving digital transformation in ways that traditional market research hadn't captured. Our unconventional approach gave us a competitive advantage. The executives around the table exchanged glances, clearly processing this information. Dr. Wijaya asked for a brief recess to consult privately with his team. Similar side conversations began in Thai and Japanese as the various delegations discussed Maria's presentation among themselves. During the break, Harrison approached Maria in the hallway outside the conference room. That was impressive, he said quietly. But I can't tell which way this is going. Are you reading the room differently than I am? Maria considered her response. I think Dr. Wijaya was testing us. He wanted to see how we'd handle a serious challenge to our approach. The fact that he's discussing it seriously instead of simply rejecting us is a positive sign. And the others? Mr. Tanaka is genuinely concerned about risk management, which makes sense given Japanese business culture. Dr. Thanakit's support carries weight because she's a respected academic in the region. If she endorses our approach, it influences the others. When negotiations resumed, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. The questions were still probing, but they focused on implementation details rather than fundamental objections to Maria's involvement. Dr. Wijaya spoke first. Miss Santos, our discussion during the break was illuminating. We appreciate your directness in addressing our concerns. However, we would like to propose a modification to the partnership structure. Maria felt her stomach tighten, wondering if this was where everything fell apart. We suggest a phased implementation approach, Dr. Wijaya continued. Initial projects would be smaller in scope, allowing all parties to evaluate working relationships and outcomes. Success in Phase 1 would lead to expanded collaboration in Phase 2. It wasn't the full contract they'd hoped for, but it wasn't rejection either. Maria looked at Harrison, who nodded slightly. That seems like a prudent approach, Maria replied. Could you outline what you'd envision for Phase 1? The next 2 hours were spent hammering out details for a $15 million initial phase that would focus on Thailand and Indonesia, with Vietnam added in Phase 2 if results met expectations. The negotiations were complex, requiring careful attention to currency fluctuations, legal frameworks, and tax implications across multiple jurisdictions. Maria found herself drawing on knowledge she'd gained not just from recent studying but from years of observing international deals at Meridian. When they finally reached preliminary agreement, Mr. Tanaka made an observation that surprised everyone. Miss Santos, I must admit that your unconventional background has actually been an asset in these negotiations. You understand both the technical requirements and the practical implementation challenges in ways that pure theorists might miss. Dr. Wijaya agreed. Your experience with different levels of business operations gives you perspective that traditional consultants often lack. You see the complete picture. As the formal meetings concluded that afternoon, the various delegations began preparing for the evening's social events, dinners, and networking opportunities that were crucial for cementing business relationships in Asian cultures. Dr. Thanakit approached Maria as they gathered their materials. You should know that your presentation today will be discussed extensively in regional business circles, she said. How you handled the age and Experience Challenge showed both respect for traditional concerns and confidence in your own abilities. That balance is exactly what succeeds in our markets. The evening reception was held at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Bangkok's skyline. The informal setting allowed for more personal conversations that would strengthen the business relationships being formed. Maria found herself in a conversation with Dr. Wijaya's daughter, Sari, who worked in her father's company's international development division. "My father was impressed by your presentation today," Sari told her privately. "But I think he was even more impressed by something else." "What do you mean?" "When Dr. Thanakit mentioned your background, working to support your family while educating yourself, that resonated deeply with him. He built his business empire starting as a street vendor's son. He recognizes determination and sacrifice." The insight helped Maria understand that the day's success had come from more than just business acumen. It had come from authenticity and the willingness to be vulnerable about her journey. Later in the evening, Harrison pulled Maria aside for a private conversation on the restaurant's balcony. "I've been thinking about what happened today," he said, looking out over the city lights. 6 months ago, I would have handled Dr. Wijaya's challenge by emphasizing your technical qualifications and hoping that was enough. What you did was much more effective. What do you think made the difference? You didn't try to hide who you are or apologize for your unconventional path. You turned your different background into a strength rather than treating it as a weakness to overcome." Maria nodded, understanding what he meant. "I spent so much energy trying to fit into traditional business culture that I almost forgot my different perspective was actually valuable." "Exactly. And that's going to be crucial as we move forward. This Southeast Asian deal is just the beginning. Margaret Peterson is already asking about expansion into African markets, South American partnerships, and European collaborations." The scope of opportunities ahead was both exciting and daunting. Maria realized she was no longer just trying to prove herself in one situation. She was building a career that could reshape how international business was conducted. The next morning brought final contract negotiations and signing ceremonies. The $15 million Phase 1 agreement was officially executed, with performance milestones that would determine expansion to the full $45 million partnership. As Maria boarded the flight back to Chicago, she reflected on how much had changed since she'd first knocked on Harrison's office door. The terrified woman who'd been worried about making one successful translation had become someone who could navigate complex international negotiations and cultural challenges. But, perhaps more importantly, she'd learned to value her unique background rather than seeing it as something to overcome. Her years of invisible observation had taught her to read people and situations with unusual insight. Her multilingual abilities allowed her to understand not just words, but cultural context. Her experience with different social and economic levels gave her perspective that traditional business executives often lacked. The flight attendant interrupted her thoughts by offering a beverage. As Maria accepted a cup of coffee, she noticed the young woman's name tag indicated she was from the Philippines. "Kamusta ka?" Maria asked quietly, using one of the few Tagalog phrases she'd learned from a Filipino coworker years earlier. The flight attendant's face lit up with surprise and delight. "Mabuti naman. You speak Tagalog?" "Just a little," Maria replied. "I'm still learning." As the flight attendant moved on, Maria made a mental note to add Tagalog to her expanding language studies. Margaret Peterson had mentioned potential projects in the Philippines, and Maria was already thinking about how to build cultural bridges in new markets. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Proud of you, Mija. How did it go?" Maria smiled as she typed back. "Better than I hoped, Papa. I think we're just getting started." When the plane landed in Chicago, Maria was met by Jennifer Chun, who had become one of her strongest allies at Meridian. "Welcome back, international superstar," Jennifer said with a grin. "Harrison wants to debrief tomorrow, but Margaret Peterson called asking for a meeting next week. She wants to discuss the African expansion project." As they drove back into the city, Maria looked at the skyline she'd grown up seeing from the ground level. Now she was viewing it as someone who belonged in those towers, who had earned her place through merit and determination. The next week would bring new challenges as she prepared for Margaret Peterson's African expansion project. There would be new languages to learn, new cultures to understand, new relationships to build. But Maria Santos was no longer the woman who questioned whether she belonged in the executive world. She was becoming a force that was reshaping how international business could be conducted when someone truly understood the value of different perspectives working together. The janitor's daughter had not just saved one $30 million deal. She was building a career that would bridge cultures and create opportunities for others who came from unconventional backgrounds. Her transformation was complete, but her impact was just beginning to be felt across the international business community. Much had changed since she'd knocked on Harrison's office door 3 weeks ago. She'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from cleaning offices to leading international projects. But the biggest change was internal. She finally believed she belonged in this world, not because someone had given her a chance, but because she'd proven to herself that she could excel at this level. The Southeast Asian expansion was still ahead, along with whatever challenges it would bring. But Maria Santos was no longer the uncertain woman who'd been afraid to speak up. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with in international business. And this was still just the beginning of her transformation. Maria smiled. My father, Carlos Santos. He's been the head janitor here for 20 years. He taught me that honest work has dignity, regardless of what others might think. I wouldn't have become who I am today without his example. Harrison nodded, understanding completely. Consider it done. And Maria? I think it's time I got to know the rest of my employees a little better. You've taught me an important lesson today about recognizing the talent that's been right in front of me all along. As Maria left the conference room that evening, she carried with her not just a new job offer, but the knowledge that she had proved herself in the most challenging situation imaginable. The invisible cleaning lady had become the voice that saved a $30 million deal. But her story was just beginning.